The Wild West was full of larger-than-life characters, lawmen, outlaws, gunslingers, and pioneers who left their mark on history. But life back then wasn't for the faint of heart. From high-stakes shootouts to mysterious ends, many of these legends met their demise in ways as wild and unpredictable as the frontier itself. In this video, we're diving into the shocking and often untold stories behind the deaths of 15 legendary Wild West figures. Some were heroes, others were villains, and a few walked the line in between. But one thing's for sure, their lives and their deaths continue to captivate us. So grab your cowboy hat and saddle up as we uncover the incredible and sometimes tragic fates of these iconic figures from the Wild West. Billy the Kid. Billy the Kid, born Henry McCarty in New York City in 1859, remains one of the most legendary figures of the Wild West. Orphaned as a teenager, Billy's life of crime began with petty theft, but quickly escalated. After escaping from jail at 15 years old, he ventured west, becoming a notorious outlaw. Billy claimed to have killed 21 men, one for each year of his short life. In reality, historians believe the number is closer to 9. His reputation as a gunslinger and escape artist grew during the Lincoln County War. This was a violent conflict between rival cattle factions in New Mexico. By 1880, Billy's name was splashed across sensationalized newspaper headlines. In 1881, Billy met his end dramatically. Sheriff Pat Garrett tracked him to Fort Sumner, New Mexico. Late at night, as Billy entered a dark room, Garrett fired the fatal shot. The 21-year-old outlaw's death only deepened his mystique. Over the years, rumors swirled that Billy had survived. Some claimed Garrett killed the wrong man, while others suggested Billy lived under an alias. Notably, 2 men, John Miller and Brushy Bill Roberts, later declared themselves to be the infamous outlaw. Despite these theories, most evidence supports Garrett's account. Even so, Billy the Kid's legacy endures, fueled by tales of his daring escapes and his role as the ultimate underdog in a ruthless frontier. Billy's story continues to captivate audiences, blending fact and myth into an unforgettable Wild West legend. Whether he was a misunderstood youth or a hardened criminal, one thing is certain. Billy the Kid remains an enduring symbol of American folklore. Belle Starr. Much of her notoriety came from dime novels and exaggerated newspaper accounts, but Belle Starr's real life was a mix of high drama, personal tragedy, and brushes with the law. Belle, born Myra Maybelle Shirley in 1848 near Carthage, Missouri, earned her reputation as the bandit queen of the Wild West. Belle was raised in a well-educated family and even trained as a pianist. However, the Civil War turned her world upside down, ruining her father's business and taking her brother's life. The family moved to Texas, where Belle began mingling with outlaws like Cole Younger and later married Jim Reed, a known criminal. Together, they were accused of cattle and horse theft, solidifying Belle's reputation as an accomplice to crime. After Reed died in 1874, Belle found herself involved with the Starr clan, a group of Cherokee outlaws. She married Sam Starr in 1880, marking the beginning of her life in Indian Territory. Their partnership wasn't just romantic, it was also criminal. They were convicted of horse theft in 1883 and served time in prison. However, Belle claimed her ranch was later off-limits to outlaws, and some neighbors even described her as helpful and kind. Belle's life ended as dramatically as it was lived. On February 3, 1889, she was ambushed and fatally shot in the back while returning home from a store. Rumors about her killer abound, with suspects ranging from rival outlaws to her own son, but the mystery remains unsolved. Though Belle Starr may not have been a hardened criminal, her ties to infamous figures and untimely death secured her place in Wild West lore. To this day, she remains a symbol of the blurred lines between legend and reality. Doc Holliday. Doc Holliday is one of the most famous figures of the Wild West. He is known for his quick wit, loyalty, and infamous role in the OK Corral shootout. Born in 1851 in Georgia to a prominent family, John Henry Doc Holliday seemed destined for a quiet, respectable life. He graduated from the Pennsylvania College of Dental Surgery in 1872 and set up a promising dental practice in Texas. However, life had other plans for him. At 15, Holliday lost his mother to tuberculosis, and he later contracted the same disease. Doctors suggested a move to the arid Southwest to ease his symptoms. In Dallas, Texas, he initially practiced dentistry, but his growing passion for gambling soon took over. Holliday discovered a talent for poker and faro, turning to cards as his primary source of income. Holliday's new lifestyle brought danger and excitement. He gained a reputation as a skilled gambler and a fearless gunslinger after a series of violent shootouts. While drifting through towns like Dodge City, Cheyenne, and Tombstone, he formed a close bond with lawman Wyatt Earp. Their friendship led Holliday to stand beside Earp during the legendary OK Corral shootout in 1881, a defining moment in Wild West history. As his health worsened, Holliday moved to Glenwood Springs, Colorado in 1887, seeking relief in the mountain air. Despite his hopes, the tuberculosis that plagued him throughout his life claimed him at just 36 years old. Holliday's life, filled with danger, loyalty, and resilience, remains the stuff of legend. Though he started as a Southern dentist, he became one of the Wild West's most iconic figures. He left behind stories that continue to captivate audiences to this day. Bat Masterson. Bat Masterson, one of the Wild West's most legendary figures, lived a life full of action, justice, and transformation. His last documented gunfight occurred in 1881 in Dodge City, Kansas, a place synonymous with lawlessness and saloons. This event marked the end of Masterson's days as a gunslinger and showcased his commitment to standing up for his family. The trouble began when Masterson, then living in Tombstone, Arizona, learned that his younger brother Jim was in danger. Jim's business partners, A.J. Peacock and Al Updegraff, had turned a dispute into a tense standoff. Masterson didn't hesitate to board a train back to Dodge City. Arriving early in the morning, he wasted no time finding the pair. Spotting Peacock and Updegraff on the street, Masterson reportedly declared, "I've come over 1,000 miles to settle this." Guns were drawn immediately, and a chaotic shootout ensued. Masterson ducked for cover near the railway bed while his opponents took shelter by the city jail. The exchange of bullets was intense but relatively short. A bystander was wounded by a stray bullet, and Updegraff was shot in the lung. When the dust settled, Dodge City's mayor and sheriff intervened, shotguns in hand, to stop the fight. Remarkably, no one was killed, and the injuries were treated. Masterson paid an $8 fine and left Dodge City that same evening, closing the chapter on his days of gunfighting. Afterward, Masterson embraced a quieter life, eventually moving to New York City. There, he worked as a journalist and lived peacefully with his wife until he died in 1921. This final gunfight encapsulated Masterson's fearless spirit, earning him a permanent place in Wild West history. Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett, often celebrated as the king of the wild frontier, is one of America's most legendary figures. Known as a frontiersman, storyteller, and U.S. congressman, he's perhaps best remembered for his bravery during the Texas War for Independence and his tragic death at the Battle of the Alamo in 1836. Crockett arrived in Texas in January 1836, leading a 30-man armed brigade to join the fight for Texas's independence. After pledging allegiance to the Provisional Government of Texas in exchange for land, he made his way to the Alamo Mission in San Antonio in February. On February 23rd, President General Santa Anna and thousands of Mexican troops began their siege of the Alamo. Despite being outnumbered, only about 200 Texas volunteers defended the mission. Crockett's sharpshooting skills and leadership played a vital role in holding off the enemy. For 13 intense days, the defenders stood their ground. They refused to abandon the mission despite advice from Texas Commander Sam Houston. On March 6th, the Mexican forces overran the Alamo, killing all the defenders. Most believe Crockett died fighting bravely in the final moments of the battle, but some historians suggest he might have surrendered with a few others, only to be executed later despite a promise of clemency. Crockett's legendary status grew after his death. Whether he died fighting or was executed, his courage and determination symbolized the spirit of the Texas Revolution. His legacy endures as a larger-than-life figure whose story continues to captivate generations. Annie Oakley. Annie Oakley, born Phoebe Ann Moses on August 13, 1860, in Darke County, Ohio, became one of America's most celebrated sharpshooters. Life wasn't easy for young Annie. After her father passed away, she started hunting to help support her family. Her remarkable marksmanship didn't just put food on the table, it paid off her family's farm mortgage. Annie's big break came at just 15 years old. During a visit to her sister, she competed in a shooting match against professional marksman Frank E. Butler. The challenge? Hit the most out of 25 targets. Frank scored an impressive 24, but Annie nailed all 25. This victory wasn't just a career starter, it was the beginning of a lifelong partnership. Frank and Annie married soon after and became a dynamic duo in the shooting world. In 1885, Annie joined Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West show, where she dazzled audiences for 16 years. Her petite frame and unbelievable skills earned her the nickname Little Miss Sure Shot. Annie performed incredible stunts like shooting dimes out of the air and even splitting playing cards edge-on from 30 paces. Annie wasn't just a star in America, she wowed European royalty too. In 1887, she met Queen Victoria and even performed her famous cigarette trick for Crown Prince Wilhelm of Germany. Even after a train accident in 1901 left her partially paralyzed, Annie fought back, proving her resilience. She continued to perform, breaking barriers and inspiring women everywhere. Annie passed away in 1926, followed by her devoted husband just 18 days later. Wild Bill Hickok. Wild Bill Hickok, one of the most legendary figures of the American West, met a tragic and dramatic end in Deadwood, South Dakota in 1876. Born James Butler Hickok in Illinois in 1837, his life was full of adventure, danger, and a fair share of drama. Hickok's rise to fame began in 1861 when he reportedly killed 3 men in self-defense after they attempted to ambush him. Newspapers and magazines of the time sensationalized his story, turning him into a household name. Over the years, tales of his bravery and sharp shooting grew. These tales sometimes stretched the truth, cementing his reputation as the quintessential Wild West gunslinger. Despite his fame, Hickok's life wasn't always glamorous. After accidentally killing his deputy during a shootout in 1871, he never participated in another gunfight. His eyesight began to fail, and he struggled to make a living. For a while, he wandered the West as a gambler, guide, and even actor, occasionally landing in jail for vagrancy. By 1876, Hickok found himself in the mining town of Deadwood. He spent his days at the Numberville 10 Saloon, playing poker and living off his reputation. On August 2nd, his life came to an abrupt end when Jack McCall shot him in the back of the head during a poker game. Hickok was holding the now infamous dead man's hand, 2 black aces and 2 black eights. Wild Bill's story blends fact and fiction, making him a true icon of the Wild West. Whether seen as a hero, showman, or something in between, his life captured the spirit of a lawless era and continues to fascinate us to this day. John Wesley Hardin. John Wesley Hardin, one of the most notorious gunfighters of the Old West, met his end in El Paso, Texas on August 19, 1895. Born on May 26, 1853, in Central Texas, Hardin's violent nature became apparent early on. At just 15 years old, he killed his first man, and over the next decade, he claimed to have killed at least 20 more. Some reports suggest the number could be as high as 40. Hardin's violent streak wasn't limited to petty fights. In 1878, he was convicted of murdering a Texas sheriff and sentenced to 25 years in prison. While behind bars, Hardin's life took an unexpected turn. He studied law and even wrote an autobiography. He was released from prison in 1892 after serving 14 years and tried to settle down in Gonzales, Texas. He worked as a lawyer and even ran for political office, though he had little success. Seeking a fresh start, Hardin moved to El Paso, a city known for its lawlessness. While there, he mostly spent time in saloons rather than courts, arguing and gambling rather than practicing law. In 1895, the El Paso sheriff tried to make the town safer by banning guns within the city limits. Trouble soon followed when Hardin's girlfriend was arrested for carrying a weapon. Hardin angrily threatened the officer involved, John Selman. Later that year, Selman found Hardin at the Acme Saloon, threw a quick shot at him, and killed him instantly. The town's jury sided with Selman, believing he had done El Paso a service. Hardin's violent life came to an end, but his name lived on, cementing his place as a legend of the Wild West. Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp, one of the most famous figures of the Old West, died peacefully in Los Angeles on January 13, 1929, at the age of 80. His death came nearly 50 years after the iconic gunfight at the OK Corral, which made him a legend. Born in 1848, Earp's early life wasn't all about being a lawman. Before he became known for his role in the OK Corral shootout, Wyatt lived in various boom towns. He tried his luck at gambling, brokering, and even as a brothel bouncer. In 1879, he and his brothers moved to Tombstone, Arizona during a silver rush. There, the Earps clashed with a group of outlaws called the Cowboys, leading to the famous gunfight on October 26, 1881. During the 30-second shootout, Wyatt, his brothers, and their friend Doc Holliday killed 3 men. While they were cleared of any wrongdoing, the shootout sparked a bitter feud between the Earps and the Cowboys. In the months that followed, things took a deadly turn. Wyatt's brother Virgil was ambushed, leaving him severely injured. 3 months later, Wyatt's brother Morgan was killed. Seeking revenge, Wyatt, along with Doc Holliday, hunted down several suspects, including Frank Stillwell, who was killed in Tucson. After these violent years, Wyatt left Arizona and wandered the West. He tried different businesses, including running a saloon in San Francisco and raising horses in San Diego. He also took part in the Alaskan gold rush before finally settling in Los Angeles. There, Wyatt found work as an unpaid consultant for Western films. He shared his first-hand knowledge of the Wild West with movie stars like William Hart and Tom Mix. Wyatt Earp's true fame didn't come until after his death, when a biography about his life helped cement his place in American history. Jesse James. Jesse James is one of the most infamous outlaws in American history, known for his daring train and bank robberies, as well as his violent lifestyle. Born on September 5, 1847 in Clay County, Missouri, Jesse came from a family with Confederate sympathies. When the Civil War broke out, Jesse and his brother Frank joined a group of guerrilla fighters. They committed brutal acts against Union soldiers. After the war, they turned to a life of crime, robbing banks and trains across the Midwest. Between 1860 and 1882, Jesse and his gang committed over 20 robberies, making off with around $200,000. They became legendary figures, partly because of their association with the Confederate cause. Some stories portrayed them as modern-day Robin Hoods, stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. But there's little evidence that Jesse ever helped anyone but himself. Jesse's life was filled with daring escapades. He and his gang were often on the run, and in 1876, a botched robbery in Northfield, Minnesota, forced Jesse and Frank to hide out for years. During this time, Jesse's fame grew, partly thanks to newspaper editor John Newman Edwards, who painted him as a heroic figure. But Jesse's luck ran out on April 3, 1882, when he was betrayed by a member of his own gang. Bob Ford shot him in the back of the head while Jesse was dusting a picture in his home. This shocking act ended Jesse's reign of terror at the age of 34. Despite his violent life, Jesse James remains a figure shrouded in legend. He symbolizes both the outlaw spirit and the dangers of betrayal. Henry Plummer. Henry Plummer, originally spelled Plumer with one M, remains one of the most controversial figures in the history of the American West. Born in Maine, Plummer made his way to the gold fields of Montana, traveling through Nevada and California. He had a rough past, which included serving as a sheriff in California. Here he was involved in several killings, horse theft, and relationships with prostitutes and other people's wives. After escaping from jail, it's believed he traveled to the Northwest and eventually settled in Bannack, Montana. Plummer was known for his good looks, gentlemanly manners, and sharp shooting skills. He married Electra Bryan, who had no idea of his criminal history. In Bannack, Plummer was elected sheriff, but suspicion grew that he was the leader of a gang of outlaws responsible for robberies and murders along the roads of Idaho and Montana. In 1864, a group of vigilantes, convinced of his guilt, took matters into their own hands and hanged him. The question of whether this was a just act has been debated ever since. Many believed Plummer was a ruthless criminal, but others argue that he was innocent of the crimes he was accused of. Some even suggest he was targeted because of his pro-South political views during a time of intense national division. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, Plummer's story remains a mystery. Was he truly the bandit sheriff or an unjustly executed lawman? The answer remains unclear, but Henry Plummer's legacy continues to spark debate and fascination. Buffalo Bill Cody. Buffalo Bill Cody, born on February 26, 1846, was one of the most famous figures of the American Wild West. A true showman, he became known for his incredible adventures and for creating the iconic Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Cody's life was filled with excitement and danger, from working as a Pony Express rider at just 14 years old to scouting for the U.S. Army during the Indian Wars. Cody gained the nickname Buffalo Bill when he killed thousands of buffalo to supply meat for railroad workers. His fame grew after meeting writer Ned Buntline in 1869, who helped turn Cody's story into a serial for the New York Weekly. This began Cody's career as a performer, and by 1883 he launched his own Wild West show. The show recreated dramatic events like wagon train attacks and sharpshooter displays. This thrilled audiences across America and even in Europe. The show featured notable performers like Annie Oakley and Sitting Bull, and it became a symbol of the American frontier. Cody's Wild West show was so successful that it attracted millions of visitors, including Queen Victoria. By the time he retired in 1912, Cody had become a legend. When he passed away on January 10, 1917, Cody was buried on Lookout Mountain in Colorado, but there was controversy over whether he should be buried in Wyoming. His body was kept in cold storage for 6 months before finally being laid to rest. Today, Cody remains an enduring symbol of the American West, and his show continues to inspire the Wild West image we know today. Bill Anderson. William Bloody Bill Anderson was a notorious Confederate guerrilla leader during the Civil War. He was known for his violent actions and ruthless tactics. Born in the late 1830s, Anderson grew up in Missouri and later moved to Kansas. It was here he became involved in the bloody conflict known as Bleeding Kansas. This was a time when settlers fought over whether slavery should be allowed in the new state of Kansas, and the area was filled with violence. Before the war, Anderson had a rough start, stealing horses and guiding wagon trains along the Santa Fe Trail. When the Civil War began, he initially joined an anti-slavery group called the Jayhawkers, but later he switched sides to fight for the Confederacy with a group known as the Bushwhackers. These groups were known for their guerrilla warfare tactics, focusing more on robbery and personal gain than political goals. Anderson's life took a darker turn after his father was killed in 1862. Seeking revenge, he and his brother killed their father's killer, and Anderson took over a band of guerrillas. His actions, along with those of his associates like William Quantrill, made him infamous. In August 1863, the collapse of a Union jail killed one of his sisters. Anderson joined Quantrill's revenge raid on Lawrence, Kansas, killing at least 150 people. By 1864, Anderson's violent raids had made him one of the most feared men in the region. He led brutal attacks on towns, including the massacre of Union soldiers in Centralia, Missouri. However, his violent life came to an end on October 26, 1864, when Union forces ambushed and killed him. His body was put on display, and it was reported that Anderson had marked 54 killings on a rope he carried with him. Butch Cassidy. On November 4, 1908, a surprising and violent event took place in the mountains of Bolivia. Carlos Pero, a courier for a mining company, was traveling with the company's payroll when he was ambushed by 2 masked men. These bandits robbed him and disappeared into the desert landscape. 3 days later, Bolivian authorities tracked the suspects to a house in San Vicente. The 2 Americans, believed to be Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, were cornered by the police. A shootout followed, and the men were found dead the next day. The story of Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is legendary. Born Robert Leroy Parker, Butch Cassidy grew up in Utah, where he turned to a life of crime. Together with Harry Longabaugh, known as the Sundance Kid, he led a gang called the Wild Bunch. They became infamous for robbing banks and trains, making off with huge sums of money. After a string of successful heists in the U.S., they fled to South America to escape the law. By 1908, they were in Bolivia, where they continued their criminal ways. It's believed that they were involved in a payroll robbery, which led to the fatal confrontation. After a gunfight with local authorities, the bodies of the two men were found, both with bullet wounds. However, there was no conclusive proof that these were actually Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Some reports claim Cassidy lived under an alias and was seen in the U.S. years later, fueling rumors that the famous outlaws survived. The true fate of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid remains one of the great mysteries of the Old West. Calamity Jane. Calamity Jane, born Martha Jane Canary around May 1, 1856, was a true character of the American frontier. Known for her wild antics, sharpshooting skills, and daring adventures, she became a legend in the Old West. Her life was full of excitement, from working as a Pony Express rider to performing in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Jane was famous for dressing in men's clothing and carrying a pistol, a look that matched her tough persona. But beneath the tough exterior, Jane had a kind heart. She was known for helping the sick and needy, earning her a reputation as a compassionate figure despite her rough lifestyle. Her friendship with Wild Bill Hickok was another famous part of her story. However, the nature of their relationship remains unclear. Some say they were romantically involved, while others argue it was just a friendship. By the late 1800s, Jane's fame was well established, but her struggles with alcoholism began to take a toll on her health. In the spring of 1903, she returned to the Black Hills and worked for Madame Dora Dufresne, helping with cooking and laundry. Sadly, her health worsened after a drinking spree on a train, and she passed away on August 1, 1903, at the age of 51. She was buried next to Wild Bill Hickok, a final twist in a life full of surprises and legends. Calamity Jane's story is a mix of truth, myth, and the untamed spirit of the Wild West. Her life might have been filled with hardship, but she left behind a legacy that continues to captivate people to this day. Bonus: Black Bart. Black Bart, born Charles Earl Bowles in 1829 in Norfolk, England, became one of the most infamous outlaws of the American West. His life took a dramatic turn when he adopted the name Black Bart and began robbing stagecoaches in California and Oregon during the 1870s. Known for wearing all black and sporting a dark, bushy beard, he gained a reputation as a mysterious and gentlemanly bandit. Black Bart stood out from other outlaws because of his polite and non-violent methods, but he also stood out for his habit of leaving poems at the scenes of his robberies. These poems mocked the authorities and taunted his pursuers, earning him a unique place in criminal folklore. He never harmed his victims and preferred to intimidate them rather than use violence. Throughout his criminal career, Black Bart successfully robbed over 28 stagecoaches. He targeted wealthy individuals and corporations, and some even saw him as a Robin Hood figure. But his luck eventually ran out. In 1883, he was captured after leaving behind a handkerchief with his laundry mark at the scene of a robbery. Despite being convicted, his polite demeanor in court won him public sympathy, and he was sentenced to only 4 years in San Quentin instead of 6. After his release, Black Bart disappeared from public life. His last known sighting was in 1888 at the Visalia House Hotel in Visalia, California. Theories about his later life include rumors that he worked as a pharmacist in Marysville, California, or even moved to Japan. To this day, the mystery of his disappearance and death remains unsolved, adding to his legendary status. These stories show just how dangerous and unpredictable life was in the Old West. From infamous outlaws to legendary lawmen, each of these figures left a lasting mark on history, some through tragic ends, others through incredible adventures. If you enjoyed learning about these wild and surprising tales, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more fascinating history content. And as always, let us know in the comments if there's a Wild West figure you'd like us to cover next. Thanks for watching.